Denver, Colorado, 2024. My name is Ethan Clark, and I've spent the past 6 years at Altitude Core Solutions, a mid-sized enterprise software firm that prides itself on culture-driven innovation, but barely understands what either of those words really mean. I was 29 when I joined, fresh out of grad school with an MBA and a degree in applied data science. I was hungry, ambitious, and if I'm being honest, naively optimistic. I believed hard work spoke for itself. I believed loyalty was rewarded. I believed managers were mentors. Altitude Core was based in downtown Denver, in a sleek high-rise with glass elevators, a kombucha tap in the break room, and motivational posters about ownership mindset and disruption. It felt like a place where things were happening. In my first week, I pulled a 60-hour sprint, helping fix a deployment that nearly tanked a $2.4 million contract. Nobody asked me to do it. I just saw what needed to be done and stayed. The VP of Engineering sent me a one-line email afterward. Good hustle. You've got a future here. I remember reading it 3 times, glowing. That future, as it turned out, came with stagnant pay, false promises, and a boss who praised me publicly while undercutting me privately. My direct manager was Brad Colston, a man whose greatest skill was self-preservation. He played the politics game like a pro, never took risks, always aligned himself with whoever was trending at the top, and delegated like his life depended on it. Brad didn't build teams. He built buffers people to absorb impact when things went wrong. I became one of those buffers. Year 1, I was just learning. Year 2, I was leading product launches solo. Year 3, I was mentoring new hires and fielding questions Brad should have been answering himself. By year 4, I was coordinating with executives on deployment timelines and vendor negotiations while still making a junior analyst salary. And every year, when I asked about advancement, same speech. You're doing great. We're in a holding pattern right now, tight budget. Let's revisit after Q2. Q2 would pass. Then Q3. Then next fiscal cycle. And somehow, there was always a hiring spree for other teams. Always a new flashy intern project with a $100K budget. Always a company offsite in Vail for VPs and department heads that wasn't in the cards for us. But a 7% raise for someone who generated $9.1 million in client revenue over 3 years? Not feasible right now, Ethan. The irony was, I wasn't even bitter at first. I didn't need a corner office. I didn't want stock options or a reserved parking space. I just wanted to feel like I mattered, like the effort I poured into this company wasn't invisible. But as time went on, I noticed things. Like how Brad praised me in meetings but excluded me from strategy sessions. Like how I trained 2 people who were promoted above me within 18 months. Like how the company kept boasting about internal mobility, but never had a defined roadmap for it. The final straw? A performance conversation, where Brad told me I needed to be more patient with the pace of corporate growth, while simultaneously asking me to take over managing Client Bridge, our biggest enterprise account, because the previous lead had resigned. That account alone was worth $4 million annually. I remember walking out of that meeting, past the break room with the dried kombucha spills on the counter, and back to my desk where a sticky note from Brad read, "Client Bridge kickoff call at 3 p.m. You've got this." And something inside me just snapped. I didn't want to have it anymore. I didn't want to carry this place while being treated like furniture. That night, I dusted off my resume, updated my LinkedIn, and applied for 5 jobs. No ceremony, no dramatic music, just a quiet, determined decision. If they weren't going to value me, I'd find someone who would. Over the next 2 weeks, I played it careful. I took recruiter calls during lunch walks around Cheeseman Park. I scheduled interviews for early mornings and late afternoons. I made sure my Slack status was in a meeting when I ducked out. It felt like cheating, but it wasn't. It was survival. And then, it happened. I got an offer. Solera Technologies, a rising tech firm out of Boulder, made me an opening offer 27% higher than my current salary. The position? Lead product strategist, the exact role I'd been chasing internally for years. The offer included quarterly performance bonuses, hybrid work flexibility, and get this, a dedicated professional development budget. I hadn't even accepted it yet, but I already felt more seen than I had in 6 years. And that's when things blew up. On Friday, I took a PTO day to visit Solara's office and meet the team before finalizing. By Monday morning, I returned to Altitude Core ready to put in my notice 2 weeks. Professional, no drama. I never got the chance. 9:18 a.m., I got called into Brad's office. He closed the door, didn't look up from his desk. "I heard you've been interviewing." I froze. He continued, "You should have come to me first. Instead, you made it clear where your priorities are." Then he slid an envelope across the table. Termination notice. Effective immediately. My badge access was revoked. My email was already shut down. Brad said something about protecting client data, but I wasn't listening. I was too busy watching 6 years of loyalty collapse into a 15-minute HR exit checklist. No thank you, no handshake, just a corporate shrug. But as I stood outside the building, cardboard box in hand, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not fear, not regret. Relief. The day after I was fired, I didn't open my laptop, didn't check LinkedIn, didn't scroll through job boards or Slack messages. It just sat. On the balcony of my fourth-floor apartment in Capitol Hill, Denver, sipping burnt coffee and watching the snow melt off the roofs. For the first time in years, I had nothing to do, and it felt oddly peaceful. No back-to-back stand-ups, no urgent fire drills, no Brad breathing down my neck with quick asks that derailed entire days. For once, I wasn't running on borrowed time. I was reclaiming it. Still, by noon, the weight of what had happened began to creep in. 6 years, gone with a 15-minute meeting and a generic HR escort. No farewell, no thank you, no acknowledgement of the millions I'd helped earn them. Just a cold corporate message. You're replaceable. But I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. That afternoon, I called Noelle, the hiring manager at Solara Technologies. We'd spoken just days before, and she'd already sent me the offer. "Hi, Noelle. It's Ethan Clark," I said. "If the offer's still on the table, I'm ready." She didn't hesitate. "Glad to hear it. We're excited to have you, Ethan. I'll send over the onboarding packet today. Can you start next Monday?" I smiled. "I'd start tomorrow if you let me." Solara was everything Altitude Core pretended to be. It wasn't flashy, just 3 floors in a converted warehouse in downtown Boulder, but the energy was different. No posters about culture, just actual conversations about it. No empty promises, just action. And people cared. You could feel it. On my first day, I was introduced at the Monday morning team sync. Noelle made sure I had a fully configured laptop, a workspace near the product team, and a personalized note from the CEO welcoming me aboard. No generic HR video. No stiff orientation speech. Just coffee, handshakes, and real humans. At 10:30 a.m., I joined my new team. Jonas, a senior engineer from Toronto, quiet but razor sharp. Lena, head of UX, blunt and brilliant. Troy, project ops guy, who somehow kept 7 timelines in his head without breaking a sweat. Noelle led the meeting. "Ethan's here to lead strategy on our core flow product line. He's got deep B2B experience, and we're lucky to have him." Jonas nodded. "We've needed someone who actually listens to clients instead of just quoting metrics." I laughed. "Listening I can do. Pretending I know everything? Less so." They laughed with me. And just like that, I felt like I belonged. Over the next few weeks, I dove into the CoreFlow platform. It was a logistics coordination tool designed for mid-size freight and warehousing operations. Kind of like the one I used to manage at Altitude Core, but better, faster, more modular. By week 3, I'd sat in on 7 client feedback calls, rewritten parts of our roadmap, and started designing a rollout plan for CoreFlow X, an enterprise upgrade Solara had planned for Q4. During one meeting, I casually mentioned a logistics firm I used to handle Edgeline Transitant, how their pain points would be a perfect match for CoreFlow X. Noelle raised an eyebrow. "Edgeline's on our target list. You think we can get a conversation?" I nodded. "I've got a contact there. Let me make a call." The next day, I called Mel Cooper, Edgeline's operations manager. "Ethan Clark," she said, surprised. "I heard you left Altitude Core, or were let go?" I laughed softly. "Bit of both, but I landed in a much better spot." We caught up briefly. I told her about Solara, about CoreFlow X, about how it was built with companies like hers in mind. She was intrigued. "I've got 45 minutes Friday morning. Want to pitch it?" "Absolutely." Friday came. I gave the CoreFlow X demo with Lena and Troy on the call. Jonas sat in, adding context on technical specs when needed. Mel asked sharp questions. She wasn't easily impressed. But by the end of the demo, she was smiling. "This is good," she said. "Simple, actionable, and you actually understood our process issues without me having to explain them 5 times. "That's because I've been there," I replied. "Literally." Mel laughed. "I'll loop in procurement next week. Let's talk numbers." When I told Noelle what happened, she grinned. You just cracked open a seven-figure lead in your first month. Ethan, we're going to need to update your onboarding checklist. I shrugged, but inside, I felt something unfamiliar. Worth. Not conditional value. Not potential value. Not someday, if you behave value. Now, tangible, real. That weekend, I went back through my files and deleted my Altitude Core work folder. It was symbolic, sure, but it mattered. For so long, I'd clung to every project and client I'd built there, hoping someday someone would look at the numbers and say, he deserves better. But they never did. And now I understood why. Because systems aren't designed to reward quiet excellence. They reward noise, familiarity, the status quo. Unless you change the system or leave it behind. I left, and it was the best decision I ever made. By the second month at Solara, everything was moving fast and I was finally running with the current instead of against it. Edgeline Transit signed the CoreFlow X contract. Not a pilot, not a let's try and see. A full 3-year implementation valued at $3.4 million. It was Solara's biggest direct conversion to date, especially impressive, since Edgeline had been Altitude Core's client for nearly 6 years. The moment contracts were finalized, Solara's leadership held an all-hands virtual call. Noelle called me out first. This deal doesn't just belong to Ethan, it happened because of him. His understanding of client pain, speed of execution, and trust with decision-makers. That's what modern consulting should look like. For a second, I didn't know how to react. I wasn't used to being seen, let alone credited. Back at Altitude Core, I'd won deals like this before. Brad took the credit. The team barely knew I was involved. At Solara, I wasn't a ghost behind the curtain, I was the one holding the mic. The win didn't go unnoticed. The Monday after the announcement, I got a LinkedIn message from a familiar name. Kelly Tran, former data analyst from my Altitude Core days. Heard about Edgeline. Brad's melting down. That was his golden account. You okay if I give your name to a few people looking to switch teams? I smiled and replied, of course. Just remind them. We do real work over here. That afternoon, Jonas approached me in the break area. Hey, he said. Heard whispers you might know someone at Mendrix Freight Group too? I nodded. Handled part of their data migration back in 2021. He grinned. Well, they just asked if we can schedule a capabilities call. Seriously? He showed me the email. Mendrix had reached out after hearing about Edgeline's move. They were reevaluating their provider and wanted to understand Solara's value proposition. This wasn't a ripple anymore, it was a wave. Meanwhile, the Edgeline rollout began, and for the first time in my career, I led an enterprise deployment without red tape, budget slashes, or managers inserting themselves for credit. I had resources. I had trust. I had freedom. I brought in Lena to streamline user adoption training. Jonas worked with Edgeline's ops team to overhaul their API integrations. Troy coordinated deployment across 5 distribution hubs. The Edgeline execs were blown away by how smooth it was. One of them, a VP named Daryl, pulled me aside after a review call. You know what's wild? He said. This is the first time in 3 years I haven't dreaded a platform update. I laughed. That's a low bar, Daryl. He smirked. Yeah, but you're clearing it like an Olympic hurdler. Then the news broke publicly. A logistics trade journal published a piece. Edgeline drops long, term partner for startup, solution sites, innovation, and listening culture. They didn't name Altitude Core directly, but the implication was clear. 3 other logistics clients reached out to Solara within 2 weeks. I could feel something shifting. Solara was no longer the underdog. We were a contender. Then came the unexpected email. Subject: Coffee? From brad.colston@altitudecore.com. I stared at it for a full minute. Hey, Ethan. Saw your name come up in some industry news. Big moves. Would love to catch up, maybe grab coffee next week? Just to talk. Brad, just to talk? The man who kicked me out with 0 notice wanted to catch up? I forwarded the message to Noelle. She called me immediately. You planning to respond? I paused. I don't know. Part of me wants to ignore it. Another part wants to find out why he's really reaching out. She was quiet for a second. Then said, You've earned the right to decide on your terms. If you go, make sure it's for you, not for closure he doesn't deserve. That stuck with me. I didn't need validation. I already had it. But curiosity? That was harder to quiet. So I replied, Sure. Thursday 9:30 a.m. Avanti's on 19th. Thursday morning arrived. Brad was already seated when I walked in. He stood, extended his hand, and gave me that same tight-lipped smile I remembered from every review where he told me next quarter. "Ethan," he said, "you look relaxed." "Freedom will do that," I replied. We sat, ordered coffee. He skipped the small talk fast. I'm going to be honest, Edgeline leaving hit us harder than expected. They were a keystone client. The board's asking questions. I nodded. That's usually what happens when you stop listening. He winced, just slightly. I underestimated how critical your role was, he said. I won't lie and say I handled things right. I should have fought harder to keep you. I didn't see how much we were leaning on you until it was too late. I leaned back. You didn't see it because you weren't looking. He didn't deny it. I guess what I'm saying is, if there's ever a path to bring you back, we'd be open to having that conversation. I nearly laughed. You want me to come back? He shrugged. We'd have to talk numbers, scope, maybe a leadership title. Let me stop you there, I said. You fired me for taking a meeting. You cut my access before I got back to my desk. Now I'm sitting across from you because your biggest client followed me out the door. He said nothing. I continued. You're not looking to bring me back. You're looking to buy stability. I'm not for sale. Then I stood. I hope things turn around, Brad, but I'm not the fix. I left without looking back. That night I got home, poured a glass of wine, and watched the city lights flicker outside my window. 6 years ago, I believed loyalty was earned through years of unpaid overtime, quiet patience, and faith that someone upstairs was keeping track. Now I knew that loyalty without reciprocity is just quiet surrender. I had stopped surrendering, and everything changed. By the end of Q2, Solara Technologies wasn't just growing, it was exploding. The Edgeline deal had set off a domino effect. 3 more companies in the logistics sector reached out to explore partnerships. One of them, Harrington Express, had previously been Altitude Core's second largest client. Now they were asking for a CoreFlow X demo, with my name specifically requested on the invite. I had become something I never expected, a face clients trusted. At our next leadership sync, Deborah Lynn, the CEO, herself brought my name up. Whatever Ethan is doing, let's make sure it scales. This isn't just smart sales, it's ecosystem building. After the meeting, Noelle pulled me aside. You ready for a new title? I blinked. I wasn't expecting that. She smiled. We're restructuring. CoreFlow is becoming its own division. We want you to run strategy across all enterprise accounts. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a seat at the table finally. The new role came with a new office, a significant bump in compensation, and a clear message from leadership. You've earned this. We want you here. I didn't cry when I saw the offer letter, but I stared at it for a long time. It was validation, but not the kind I'd chased in my earlier career. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about showing Brad or Altitude Core that they were wrong. It was about finally being in a place that knew my worth before I had to prove it over and over again. The new responsibilities came fast. I was now leading a team of 7, including 2 direct reports and 5 client engagement managers. We were tasked with designing scalable deployment strategies, refining user onboarding, and tailoring performance metrics across verticals. For the first time in my life, I had to stop being the guy who did everything and start being the guy who built systems for others to succeed. It was thrilling. It was daunting. And some days, it was deeply humbling. Lena pulled me aside during our 4th week of rollout prep for Harrington Express. You know what I appreciate, Ethan? You don't micromanage. You trust us to do our jobs. I laughed. I've had too many bosses who didn't. I swore I'd never become one of them. She grinned. Well, you're keeping that promise. But the real shift came when I was invited to speak at the Western Logistics Innovation Summit in Salt Lake City. The panel was called Retaining Talent Through Respect: What Modern Teams Really Want. At first, I was hesitant. I wasn't used to being public-facing. My work had always spoken for itself. But Deborah said, Ethan, they need to hear from people like you, people who lived it. So I said yes. The day of the summit, I stood in front of a room of 300 executives and industry leaders, mostly older than me, mostly wearing that same guarded expression I'd seen on Brad for years, curious, skeptical, quietly calculating. I told them my story, not as a cautionary tale, as a case study. I walked them through how my previous company had squeezed loyalty without reward, how they'd failed to invest in the very people generating their revenue, and how it led to mass client attrition and eventually, to me walking out the door. Then, I showed them the numbers. The impact Solara had made by simply respecting its people and listening to their insight. People don't leave jobs. They leave disrespect disguised as corporate culture. Loyalty isn't free. And once you break, trust it takes more than a ping pong table to win it back. They clapped, slowly at first, then louder. One executive approached me afterward. I fired 2 good employees last year because I thought they were being disloyal for applying elsewhere. After hearing this, I think I owe them an apology. That moment stayed with me. Back at Solara, the buzz from the summit reached our inboxes. New client leads poured in. Recruiters started referencing my panel in their job listings. Join the company redefining modern consulting. I wasn't just building strategy. I was shaping reputation. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from Kelly again. Brad's out. I raised an eyebrow. She sent another. Altitude Core's restructuring. After Harrington pulled out, board lost confidence. They're folding 2 departments. Brad took the fall. I stared at the screen for a while. No celebration. No schadenfreude. Just silence. Because part of me knew this was always coming. Not because of Edgeline or Harrington, but because you can't build an empire on disrespect and expect it to stand. That evening, Noelle and I grabbed drinks after work. She raised a glass. To the guy who proved culture is strategy. I smiled. To the company that believed it. 2 months after the summit, Solara Technologies was no longer just a rising player we were making headlines. Tech journals ran features titled, The Quiet Revolution of Solara. How listening to employees built a consulting powerhouse. Our inbound leads tripled. Partnership inquiries flowed in from sectors outside logistics, healthcare tech, fintech startups, even education platforms. Everyone wanted a piece of the core flow model. Internally, it was chaos but the good kind. Late-night whiteboard sessions. Back-to-back stakeholder calls. A talent influx we hadn't planned for. We'd outgrown our existing structure almost overnight. And that's when the acquisition offer came in. One morning, Deborah gathered the senior team in the large conference room, the one with skyline views of Boulder's snowy peaks. She handed out printed decks. The logo on the first slide stopped me cold. Revant Systems, a massive national consulting firm. Big money, big clients, and, ironically, one of Altitude Core's closest industry partners. Deborah folded her hands. They're offering a full acquisition, buyout for shareholders, retention packages for leadership, autonomy for existing teams for now. There was a long silence. Noelle spoke first. Why now? Deborah's voice was calm. Because they're scared. Edgeline, Harrington, the press. They see where we're going, and they'd rather buy us than compete with us. My pulse was steady, but I could feel the pressure building behind my ribs. Revance wasn't just big. It was everything we weren't. Bureaucratic, top-heavy, political. The opposite of what we'd built. Jonas leaned back in his chair. What does it mean for the culture? Debra said. That's the unknown. They're promising continuity for now, but you've all seen how these things go. Everyone looked at me. I was the newest at the table, but the most vocal about culture, equity, and protecting what we had. I looked down at the deck again. Retention bonuses, promotion fast tracks, profit-sharing options. To someone like Brad, this would have been the dream. To me, it felt like déjà vu. That night, I didn't sleep. I thought about how hard we'd worked, how fast we'd moved, how many people had come here looking for something different. Not a stepping stone, not a resume boost, a place to matter. I thought about my team, how Lena turned down a 6-figure offer elsewhere to stay with us. How Troy once said, "This is the first job where I don't count the hours till Friday." I thought about Kelly, now part of our growing operations unit. She'd left Altitude Core with 2 weeks severance and found real purpose at Solara. What would an acquisition mean to them? What would it mean to me? The next morning, I asked Deborah for a one-on-one. I didn't come with demands or ultimatums. Just a question. Do we need to sell? She smiled softly. You mean financially? Number. We're profitable, growing, stable. Then why consider it? She leaned back, thinking. Because the weight gets heavy. The higher we climb, the more pressure there is to cash in before it's too late. Investors, competitors, markets. I nodded. I understood. But I had to ask one more thing. What if we doubled down instead, raised a smaller round, stayed lean, protected the culture, kept building slow and right? Deborah was quiet. Then, if I had a partner willing to lead that charge, I'd say yes. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't want to just be part of Solara's story. I wanted to shape it. That afternoon, I called a meeting with Noelle, Jonas, and Lena. I laid out the idea. An internal growth proposal. Reject the buyout. Raise a strategic round instead own, aligned with our mission. Not just to stay independent, but to stay true. It wouldn't be easy. It would mean tighter margins, longer nights, more responsibility. But not one person hesitated. Lena smiled. I didn't come here to build someone else's empire. Jonas nodded. Let's write our own playbook. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a counterproposal. A lean growth roadmap. Employee equity plans. Culture preservation clauses. We pitched it to Deborah and the board. They challenged us hard, pushed back on numbers, questioned projections. But they listened. Because this wasn't rebellion. It was belief. In what we'd made, and what it could still become. The decision came on a Friday. Deborah called us into her office. She smiled exhausted, but proud. Revance is off the table. We're moving forward with the internal growth path. And Ethan, the board unanimously voted to name you Chief Strategy Officer. He blinked. CSO. Not just a title. A trust. I nodded slowly. Let's build something they can't buy. 1 year later, Solara Technologies didn't just survive the storm of acquisition offers. We'd become the benchmark. The decision to grow internally, rather than sell out, was met with skepticism at first. Investors called it idealistic. Competitors called it short-sighted. Some media even labeled us a startup that blinked at scale. But within 9 months, our core flow division doubled revenue. Client satisfaction scores hit record highs. And we launched Solara Path, a leadership training initiative built entirely from our team's culture-first philosophy. We didn't just retain our people, we attracted better ones. And we never looked back. That fall, I was invited to speak again this time, as the closing keynote at the National Strategy and Growth Conference in San Francisco. I stood on stage before 900 executives, founders, and team leaders. Many wore the same badges I once wore. Burned out, skeptical, hungry, but tired. I told them the story of Solara, of choosing people over payout, of betting on culture when spreadsheets told us otherwise, of turning rejection into redirection, of how being undervalued didn't make me worthless, it just meant I was in the wrong room. I ended with this. Success isn't just what you build, it's what stays standing when you're no longer in the room. The kind of leadership that inspires someone else to stay 5 more years because they know they matter. That's the kind of legacy worth choosing. The standing ovation felt surreal. But what mattered more was what came next. As I stepped down from the stage, a woman approached me. Early 30s, calm confidence in her voice. Ethan, my name's Samantha Cross. I used to work for Brad Colston. He blinked. Oh? She smiled. I left Altitude Core last spring. Saw what you built here. It gave me the courage to walk. We shook hands. She leaned in. We're building something new, and I want to do it right this time. You've shown us how. In her words, I saw the full circle moment I never expected. It wasn't about Altitude Core anymore, or Brad, or the raise I never got. It was about setting a different standard, one that made others believe they could too. A few weeks later, I got a text from Kelly. Brad's launched a podcast. It's called Strategic Leadership in the Modern Era Topter. I chuckled and set my phone down. It didn't bother me. Let him tell his version. Let him sell his brand. I didn't need to correct the record. I had a life that spoke for itself. In the final board meeting of the year, Deborah asked each of us to share one thing we were proudest of. Some mentioned revenue goals. Others brought up retention wins or new client acquisitions. When it was my turn, I paused. Then said, I'm proud we didn't fold when it got hard. I'm proud we didn't sell for comfort. And mostly, I'm proud we built something that no one has to leave just to feel seen. Deborah smiled. Noelle nodded. In the silence that followed, I felt it. Not just success. Peace. These days, I still walk into the Solara office a few times a week. I keep my desk in the corner, not isolated, just out of the way. People stop by, ask questions, pitch ideas, share stories, and I listen. Not because I have to, but because once upon a time, no one did that for me. And that was the beginning of everything.